What's going on, and welcome back, everybody. It is Brian, and we have another review for you all to go over quickly. We are checking out the new Riff 6-year 100% malted rye. Now, this is a product that I wasn't too sure about. I didn't really have a lot of desire to try it out necessarily. I was a fan of New Riff initially, and not that anything particularly happened. I just kind of fell away from the 4-year whiskey drinking profile for the most part. I thought the profiles were good, and I've tried several other products that they've released over the years, from the Winter Warmer to the Balboa Rye. However, this is just one that I hadn't really seen pop up here in Louisville, and then I found it at a bar. I tried it, and I was very surprised with it, and then I was able to, thanks to my friend Joel, grab this bottle from him and do a quick review for you all. So we've already got it poured out, and we're just going to dive right in. Now, what we're going to do after as well is I have one of my single barrel new Riffs from a couple of years ago, and we'll just quickly taste through that. And then I'll also give you some comparison notes from the Stellum Rye, because the Stellum is another one that I recently reviewed. And again, price-wise, it's probably something we should bring up. So on the nose, the first thing that you're going to notice is this is not really like a rye whiskey that you might be used to. It is very much like a bourbon. And while we say that sometimes when it comes to the barely legal ryes, this is another one that follows suit. You get a lot of dense caramel, brown sugar, and honey notes right away. Lots of vanilla. But there is an underlying note that almost kind of plays out to dusty whiskey as well. There's some sort of like this little spice that's really intoxicating that kind of layers underneath there. Now, you're not escaping also the profile of some darker fruits hidden in there, some barrel char, a touch of leather. These are things that all kind of reside in there. There's something that's a little bit medicinal about it. It's not quite licorice-y. It's not quite like anise or anything like that, but there is like a slight medicinal cherry, or like a Luxardo cherry or maraschino cherry, but slightly medicinal, slightly funky in a dusty whiskey sort of way. So that's really intriguing too, as you nose it. There's also a little bit of like lemon oil too. It's not very orangey or big, strong citrus notes, but there is like a touch of lemon, I feel like I notice in it as well. But overall, really sweet, really bourbon-like, really inviting nose. Let's go ahead and jump into the palate. Now, the palate's a little bit light upon entry. It has a spice to the front of it that's not quite what I would usually call baking spices. It doesn't really have a myriad of spice. It's kind of a specific spice, slightly peppery or something like that, but not really like freshly cracked pepper or anything like that. It definitely has some sort of, it's almost even a little bit salty, but it's got a little bit of some spice kind of leading the sips. You get into some floral touched brown sugar, dense sweetness as well. And if you just stop for a minute and let it linger, you start to pull out these kind of toasted grain notes to it. You get some notes of chocolate that are kind of underneath everything, so it's almost like this Tootsie Roll kind of flavor that sits underneath as well. You have a little bit of spearmint. You pull out a little bit of musty or like damp oak flavors to it. It has some char a little bit too, like some barrel char influence. I feel like if you inhale and taste as well, you'll notice that kind of lingering the sips. But beyond that char and the oak that kind of comes out in the finish, you get something that's almost like eating root beer candy. So if you've ever had either the circular, or I don't know, if you had root beer flavored candies, you know that you kind of get something that tastes a little bit like root beer or birch beer or something of that quality, but then it almost kind of gives a little spice that ramps a little bit too. And I feel like that's kind of something that you get in this glass. Let's quickly jump over to the other New Riff Rye. So the other New Riff Rye is a single barrel, so it is going to be a little bit higher proof. This is just a high rye content rye, but just their standard fare. And I feel like right away, you notice just a ton more mint, a ton more citrus. It's one of those ones that's almost kind of toothpastey with how much mint that there is. And it's got some of that candied citrus as well. It's nice. It's just a very specific toned rye whiskey. And then we'll do a quick jump here to the Stellum Rye, just again for a comparison, as that's another review that we've done. Now this is a completely different rye than either of the other two. It's a lot brighter. I'm not going to go super verbose about what this is like. You could check out my review that I did on the Stellum Rye. This rye just has a ton of going on. Very complex pour with a huge amount of flavors to it, but it's very rye forward driven for someone who likes ryes. Going back over here to the new Riff, even just immediately on the nose, it's a completely different profile. It's slightly dusty, sweet, sugary, fruity rye profile. If you told me that this was a bourbon, I would believe you. And honestly, when I had it first on the bar, that is what surprised me. I tried it and I said, this doesn't taste like a rye. There's lots of vanilla here. This is the rye that I would want to lean towards for my non-rye drinking friends. So what's tricky about this is it comes in at an SRP around the $59.99 profile. So you were running in, like we've mentioned previously, with the Nashville Barrel Company small batch 100 proof, with your Pikesville. And then again, with the Stellum that I had mentioned in my town was like $45. Or again, we might find in most places around $55. So a little bit cheaper of a pour, barrel strength pour, definitely more of a rye person's pour. But if you wanted to try something new and you were the fan of the Kentucky ryes or the barely legal ryes, I'd suggest giving the new Riff Malted Rye a chance. I think that it's aged 6 years, like the Sazerac Rye or the Thomas H. Handy, other ryes that we've seen before. I definitely think that you get some nice development of flavor that comes with that. And I think you notice it on the palate with the oak, with a slight touch of leather, and some of the interesting artifacts that this pour does have. Just know that you're going to get yourself a sweeter rye. It's not going to have the traditional spearmint notes, dill notes, or even big, strong citrus notes as well. It's going to be a little bit more sweet drinking, bourbon style, a little bit lighter in mouthfeel, a little bit lighter in body, but really good, enjoyable flavors. Thanks so much for tuning in to the show, everybody. I hope you liked what you heard, or at least it's helpful if this is a product you thought about picking up, or you needed to compare it taste-wise to a couple other things. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel, hit that like button, leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you're enjoying the content. If you have tried this malted rye or compared it to other rye stuff, I'd love to hear what you all are enjoying. If there's something you want to hear me talk about on the show, feel free to leave me a message, send me a DM or a message somehow, social media, I'm at Abandoned Bourbon, or you can always just send me some samples. I'd love to try something if you want to hear me talk about a specific blind or any other specific samples you want to hear me review on the channel. You can check out the Inch Proof podcast if you want more content. That's a podcast that I do with Drew P. Whiskey. He's also here on YouTube. And you can catch us over on his channel generally on Thursday nights going live. We have some barrel picks coming up for our Patreon members and those who follow us on the respective channels. So you can catch us on patreon.com/inchproof podcast to learn more information about that and the barrel pick that we have coming up real soon. Until next time, everybody, cheers.